You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance has a definition of anti-Semitism that is worrying advocates of Palestinian human rights. Later in the show, we will talk to Professor Faisal Bhabha, international human rights law expert. But first, some news headlines. Police shootings increase by 25% this year. Vancouver's homeless shelters at full capacity. Canada's non-essential 911 calls during 2022. Israeli government to accelerate illegal settlements. And now the details. 87 Canadians have been shot by police this year between January and November, reports a media source. Out of these, 46 were fatally injured. 5 shootings happened this month, which are not included in the tally. This is a 25% increase from the previous year. Last year, police shot 70 people, out of which 37 died. Most of the people shot by police are young men. A professor of criminology and associate dean at the University of Alberta says there are various reasons for the increase in these police encounters. These include inadequate training, over-dependence on force, and no proper accountability. A crisis is looming in Vancouver as homeless shelters are at maximum capacity. One shelter is turning away 6 people a day. As winter temperatures drop, homeless people face frostbite and hypothermia, which is when the body's core temperature drops below 35 degrees. They are also at risk in temporary shelters. One caseworker says tents can go up in flames if people use candles to keep themselves warm. There are an estimated 3,500 people in Vancouver who are homeless. Indigenous people are 13 times more likely to be homeless. The city of Vancouver has opened a few warming centres. This year, people across Canada had difficulty getting through to 911 operators. One of the reasons is that precious time is lost when operators deal with non-emergency calls. Minutes can make a difference in saving a life, say Ottawa police. One media source has compiled a collection of needless calls to 911. These include someone calling in about an overflowing toilet, someone wanting a police check on a potential date from Tinder, and someone reporting a fire in the distance that turned out to be a sunset. Police remind us that 911 is only for immediate danger or if a crime is in progress. Israeli Prime Minister-designate Benjamin Netanyahu has pledged to accelerate settlement building in the occupied West Bank and the Syrian Golan Heights. Israel's parliament will hold a special session tomorrow to grant confidence to Netanyahu's new government. Netanyahu wrote on his Telegram account that the Jewish people have an exclusive and inalienable right to all parts of the land of Israel. He said that the government will respect the religions and traditions of other people in the country in accordance with the values and of the Declaration of Independence. There are approximately 650,000 settlers living in 164 settlements in the West Bank. Under international law, all Jewish settlements in occupied territories are illegal. And that's it for the news. Academics often get caught up in definitions of terms, but these debates rarely spill over into the public domain. Exceptions to that have been the meanings of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. Palestinian human rights activists are concerned about the potential damaging impact a specific definition of anti-Semitism might have on their advocacy. To explain, we are joined by international human rights law expert Faisal Bhabha, associate professor at Osgoode Hall Law School in Toronto. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Are you surprised that we're having to do a interview about the definition of a term anti-Semitism?
Well, I'm not surprised because I've been observing this phenomenon for some time, for about 20 years, actually, if not longer. There has been an effort by some of Israel's most ardent defenders to weaponize anti-Semitism against those who are advocating for Palestinian human rights.
I want to read the definition later in case people haven't heard of it, but I just want to bring up something from when I first became Muslim in the 90s. There were a lot of Muslims trying to say, well, Arabs are Semites too, so even this whole definition of anti-Semitism meaning only discrimination against Jews doesn't make sense. Is that an old-fashioned thought these days?
I think it's kind of irrelevant now. I don't think it really speaks to the issue. What I was talking about kind of responds to that in a sense, which is that 20, 25 years ago or so, this notion of so-called new anti-Semitism began to be pushed by said zealous defenders of Israel who wanted to use anti-Semitism and sort of portray the Palestinians and their supporters as the new Nazis. And that's what the doctrine of new anti-Semitism essentially does, is it refocuses away from European anti-Semitism, which is a unique and well-documented historical phenomenon, that is the hatred of Jews in Europe, rooted in Christianity and legacy, long legacy of European culture, and to refocus that on the Islamic world, and to analogize Muslims, Palestinians, Arabs, and the supporters of Palestinian human rights as essentially the new Nazis. And we see this now embodied in the IHRA definition and its examples.
And does that coincide with the establishment of the State of Israel? We know that historically Muslims and Jews got on very well. In fact, when the 1492 expulsion from Spain happened, the Jews sought refuge in the Ottoman Empire. There's nothing inherent about, Muslims hating Jews. So this new anti-Semitism, did that coincide then in the 1950s?
Well, it's focusing on the present, and so it's certainly. I don't think the ideas associated with the new anti-Semitism are concerned with history or histories of coexistence at all, but are concerned with call it the post-colonial era, the post-World War II era, when Jews left Muslim countries in large numbers, close to 1 million Jews left in circumstances that have been described variously as driven out and by local populations or local states, and forced out by those encouraging Zionist immigration to the new state of Israel. And so across this range of experiences, there's itself a lot of discussion and debate, controversy, and that history gets manipulated and pushed in different directions to support different political positions. But I think for the purposes of understanding, defining anti-Semitism today, the history of Muslim-Jewish relations is really very far away from that, from those issues and from that discussion.
Well, we've been mentioning it without defining it properly, so I'll just say it's the definition that is of concern to Palestinian human rights activists is the IHRA, which stands for International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition. And it goes like this: anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. When I read this definition, nothing untoward strikes me about it. And obviously the city of Vancouver has recently adopted, and the Globe and Mail in December was urging other municipalities to adopt it. It seems, like an innocuous definition. So are you able to share with us why Palestinian human rights activists become concerned about this particular IHRA definition?
Well, it's true that to many, the definition itself is rather unobjectionable. The greatest critique one could make of it is that it's a little vague and imprecise. It certainly isn't the best definition one could come up with. But it's not the definition itself that has raised concern. Rather, it's the examples that are given. And there's 11 examples. And the majority of those examples deal not with the persecution of Jews or hatred towards Jews as Jews, but rather with criticism of the state of Israel. And that is what has what initially, when the definition was being debated and was first adopted and being pushed on governments, there was a movement that arose around 2 years ago, saying that this is going to be used to suppress Palestinian speech and pro-Palestinian speech. Now, 2 years later, those groups that were warning, groups like Independent Jewish Voices, IJV, who have been documenting the uses of the IHRA definition, are saying our warnings have already turned out to be accurate, and there's lots of documented cases of silencing, chill, smear, and so on as a result of this definition.
So the problem is not the actual words inside the quotes of a definition, but how it's the examples of what that would be. And you're saying that one of those examples is to say Israel is a racist state is an example, according to IHRA, of anti-Semitism.
Correct. That's one of the most disconcerting examples, because it essentially in one example casts a whole lot of people, a whole lot of people, including Jewish people, including Muslim people, and including lots of other people who have looked at the history, looked at the issues, considered the facts, and reached an opinion that Israel is, as a state, in its structure and its practices, however a person may approach what that means, is a racist endeavor. The example doesn't tell you how to define a racist endeavor, doesn't give specifics, so it could capture a lot of different kinds of ideas, but mostly the kind of ideas that this is meant would likely capture. I don't know if it was designed to capture, but it would likely capture those who criticize Israel as an apartheid state. That's increasingly lots of people.
Well, and that's why you said the definition is being weaponized against Palestinian advocacy.
Well, Palestinians themselves have always said that Israel is illegitimate because it was built on expropriated land, and there's nothing racist or offensive on its face about that kind of a statement. It's the kind of thing that we in Canada are very much aware of, and we articulate those kinds of sentiments in relation to the founding of this country, and we understand that this country was built on illegitimate premises, namely that the European settlers that founded Canada had a right to do so, and that their dealings with the Indigenous people here were somehow just. And we now know that that was not the case. And so the very same logic applies there, and the Palestinians have been saying that continuously since the state of Israel was created on their land. But that is now called by multiple levels of politics, including the Prime Minister of Canada, racist and unacceptable.
It's obviously a big issue. We can't do justice in 10 minutes. We're out of time, but thank you very much for just giving us this brief glimpse.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe, and God bless.